Now that we've learned about Amendments 1 through 10, let's talk about 11 through 12. The 11th Amendment talks about lawsuits against the states. It states a citizen of one state cannot sue another state in federal court. So meaning a citizen from Ohio cannot sue the state of Pennsylvania in a federal courtroom. That court case would actually happen inside of the Pennsylvania court system. The 12th Amendment deals with presidential and vice presidential election. Under the original Constitution, it was set up where everybody ran for president. So the winner got the presidency, while the runner-up got to be vice president. This became a huge problem because obviously under the two-political system, you could possibly have a president from one political party and a vice president from another political party. So they put in the 12th Amendment, and now it's under the system which we know today, where the president and vice president run on the same ballot, so they're voted together. Now, the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment are what known as the Reconstruction Amendments. These were passed after the Civil War was fought, and they all deal with slavery. So the 13th Amendment abolished slavery, or ended slavery. The 14th Amendment gave former slaves the right to citizenship. Now, we view this today as all people who are either natural born or go through the naturalization process have citizenship no matter what their race is. So we can no longer discriminate the U.S. citizenship on someone's race. The 15th Amendment gave African American males the right to vote. So it protects the right to vote no matter what your race is. The 16th Amendment is income tax. So when the 16th Amendment was passed, this gave the federal government the right to tax people's wages and incomes. The 17th Amendment deals with direct election of senators. Under the original Constitution, in Article 1, senators were actually chosen by the state legislatures. The 17th Amendment now permitted people of the state to choose their senators. The 18th Amendment is the prohibition of alcohol. So the 18th Amendment outlawed the manufacturing, transportation, and consumption of all alcoholic beverages. This was passed in the early 1900s, right after World War I. The government excuse here was they wanted to limit the consumption of grains to save for our troops who were fighting overseas. There was a huge temperance movement. The United States had a large alcohol problem at that time period. So this was a way for the United States to try to solve that problem and appease those people who were protesting the use of alcohol. Now, the way I try to remember 18 is you think about your two big significant birthdays. Your 18th birthday when you become an adult, and 21 when you're able to drink. So 18 is prohibition of alcohol. So when you're 18, even though you're an adult, you're still not allowed to drink alcohol. The 19th Amendment is women's suffrage. Women's suffrage literally means women's right to vote. So the 19th Amendment was passed in 1920. It always amazes me to think that the United States started in 1776, and it wasn't until 1920 that women actually gained the right to vote. So women have had the right to vote less than 100 years in the United States. The 20th Amendment is what we know as the lame duck period. This lame duck period actually shortened the time period between the elections and when officials get inaugurated. So the first Tuesday of every November is election day. And then inauguration under the 20th Amendment got moved to January 20th. So that lame duck period, we know that word lame in our community is meaning when an animal can't walk. Okay, if an animal goes lame, they can't walk. So the lame duck period is that time period where an elected official is voted out of office, so that 3-month period from November through January where they run out of power. 21 repealed prohibition. So this takes away the 18th Amendment. It allows the manufacturing, transportation, and consumption of alcoholic beverages. So again, an easy way to remember this is 18, you're prohibited, you're not allowed to drink, so the prohibition of alcohol, but 21, you're at legal age to drink. So it repealed prohibition, you're allowed. The 22nd Amendment. 22 is also another easy one to remember. This puts a limit on the president to 2 terms. So every president up until FDR had not served more than 2 terms. FDR was elected to 3 terms. He was elected during the Great Depression in the 1930s, and he was our president all the way through World War II. He died right at the end. Every president had done that because George Washington had only served 2 terms. So that was a precedent set by George Washington that all presidents other than FDR had actually followed. So because of the 22nd Amendment, presidents can only serve 2 terms. And again, this is a good one to remember because they're all 2s. 22, 2 terms. The 23rd Amendment gave citizens who live in Washington, D.C. the right to vote, so the suffrage for D.C. Washington, D.C. is not a state. They do not have representation in Congress. So because they do not have representation in Congress, they have no electoral votes. So the 23rd Amendment changed that and allowed them to vote for President of the United States. 24 is the abolition of the poll tax. So abolition is to get rid of. Poll tax is referring to a tax that was collected to vote. So before the 24th Amendment, people would actually have to pay a tax to vote. They took this away because it was discriminating those who were poor, but also it was used during the Jim Crow era to not allow blacks to vote. The 25th Amendment deals with presidential succession. This was passed after the assassination of JFK and also during the Cold War era, when many Americans were fearful of a nuclear attack by Russia, where we could lose both our president and our vice president all in one fell swoop. So what they decided was they needed a order of who would become president if something would happen to our president and our vice president. So the Constitution in the Articles states that if something happens to the president, the vice president would take over, but the 25th Amendment goes further into it, listing all of the order that people would take office. So after the president is the vice president, and then the Speaker of the House, and then the President pro temp of the Senate, followed by all of the President cabinet members, starting with the oldest created, which is Secretary of State. So 25 is presidential succession. 26 lowered the voting age to 18. So the voting age used to be 21. Now, this amendment was ratified in 1971 after the... So the 26th Amendment was ratified after the Vietnam War. The controversy in the Vietnam War was the draft. So people from 18 years old had to register for the draft, which is forced military service. So the controversy came that kids who were drafted did not have the right to vote. So the 26th Amendment made it a constitutional that's saying 18-year-olds had the right to vote. And finally, the 27th Amendment. The 27th Amendment limits Congress from pay raises. So basically what it says is Congress can't give itself a pay raise. It has to wait until the next election for them to receive it. So they're not actually giving themselves a pay raise because they could get voted out the next congressional term. It could possibly go to somebody else. Alright, if you have any questions, make sure that you rewatch the video or send me a question.